right, well, I'm glad you're back today for number 7 through 12 on my list of 12 killer mistakes you do not want to make as a startup CEO. Hi, I'm Brett. I enjoyed speaking with you last week on this exact same topic. We went through numbers 1 through 6 on my list. You can find that on my YouTube page or on my website if you want and find that version. But here's number 7 through 12. And you want to stick around because somewhere in here, I'll tell you when we get there, is the one killer mistake that you absolutely positively want to avoid at all costs because it's really tough to get out of this one. It is a real killer and you do not want to have this happen in your business. You want to stick around for that one. I'll let you know when we get there. So let's go. Let's go on to number 7 on my list. Number 7, waiting for the perfect time and the perfect place to launch your company, to launch your product. And I have to admit, I got to be really honest with you. I was watching somebody else talk about this, one of the people over at Y Combinator talk about this, and he was so spot on right. And when I think about this in my own experience, it's spot on. Who can think of when Facebook launched or any big company their launch day, the specific day? When I think about our company's launch day, it was pretty inauspicious. In fact, we soft launched. And then when we hard launched, yeah, there was a lot of fanfare about it, but the fanfare kind of went like this, and then down within 2 days. In a lot of ways, it really doesn't matter when you launch. The key is just to launch and get out there and start gaining feedback on your business and on your product. Because if you wait forever, you're burning money, you're burning cycles, and you're burning, most importantly, you're burning time. And when you burn time, you don't get that time back as a startup. So you have to be really careful. Now, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying throw out a product that you know isn't going to work or is half-assed. That's a mistake. I am saying get your MVP out there as fast as possible, even with flaws. As long as you know that the MVP is significantly better in certain areas, even if it's hard to use, it's worth the trial to get out there and start getting feedback, because the quicker you get that feedback, the quicker you iterate and the quicker you get to the next level. Now, again, I'm going to say this again, there are always counter examples of companies that waited and it was the right thing to do. There's always, for anything on my list here, there's always the counter to it, of somehow or other you succeed. But more often than not, following this list is going to be better for you than not following the list. Number 8 on my list, you don't have a go-to-market strategy. I've seen this too many times to count, of startups that somehow or other magically think, I built it and they will come and they will find me. Well, guess what? They won't. So if you find yourself in this trap where somehow or other you believe that somehow, some way, your customers are going to just find you and you don't have to do any marketing, that's your go-to-market strategy, is your marketing. You don't have to do any marketing. Well, I can almost guarantee you, you're on your road to failure. You don't want to do this. So if you find yourself and you don't have a strategy, that's okay. Regroup, and guess what? Take the time and develop a strategy. Think logically about how customers are going to find you. What's the way? And by the way, sometimes you don't have to spend money to do this. There are all sorts of wonderful stories out there of companies that have gotten their first group of customers by working hard, by using their network, talking to people that they know, and building their business this way. Let me give you some thoughts on this. Here are a couple things that you could do. Number 1, focus on things that aren't scalable. That's right, non-scalable things at the beginning, because here's a way to think about your business. If you don't have any customers, what's your goal? Get to 1 customer. Now let's say you have 1, what's your next goal? Get to 10 customers. Say you're at 10, what's your next goal? To go from 11 to 100. If you're at 100, from 100 to 1,000, and so forth and so on. And each step of the way along the ladder, your strategies may change. What you did to get the first customer may not be what you did to get the second customer, and what you did to get the 10th, and so forth and so on. but you've got to start somewhere. So you've got to start stepping up the ladder, to get there. And each step may require tweaks to your strategy. There is a wonderful book. It's a quick weekend read. The book is called Traction by Gabriel Weinberg. It's a wonderful book on the subject. I highly recommend it for what you're going to embark on here. But if you don't have a strategy, take the time. Read, learn. This isn't rocket science here to get this done, but you can learn how to do this stuff. And you can learn how to figure out how to make your customers aware based on your budget, based on how much money you have to spend, how to do it. Do you know what's almost as bad as not having the marketing strategy? Maybe it's even worse. Is not having a financial plan. It just crushes me to see companies operate this way, yet over and over again, I have seen first-time CEOs make mistakes around financing. Not knowing their financial plan, not knowing their numbers, not having their financial plan down, not having a balance sheet done. All this stuff comes back and bites you if you don't do it right. If you don't know how much money you have and you're doing everything by the back of the envelope and you're guessing, you can make horrendous mistakes. Let me give you some examples. You could think you can afford to hire people and you can't. That's one thing you can do. So now what happens when that happens? You have to lay people off. There's nothing worse than laying people off. Let me give you another example. Let me give you the flip side. You think you can't afford to hire people, and you can, and you're stifling the growth of your company. Those are just a couple examples of the killer things about financial plans. Let me give you some more because I want to keep going on this one. Let's say you don't know how much cash you need to raise for the next round of funding that you need. It's kind of important, isn't it? Or how long that money's going to last, or when you're going to get to cash flow positive. The list goes on and on. Now the thing is, if you think financial planning is hard, it's not. It's actually relatively straightforward. You can do this stuff. There are plenty of free tools online to help you. There's some very inexpensive tools to help you online. It can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet to do this stuff. Or if you want to spend a little bit more money, not much more, you can go to liveplan.com and they'll help you out. There are all sorts of good tools out there to help you. There is no excuse not to have a financial plan for your company and not to know what's going on financially. Do this today. Spend the extra time, spend the extra effort, because now you'll be in control of your financial destiny once you've done it. Number 10. And this one's a common error. I've made this error. A lot of people make this error because it's really tough to get this right. And that is you hire a sales VP too early, or you hire the wrong sales VP. Both are killers because it just slows your progress down when you hire the wrong person. So let me tell you how to avoid this. First of all, who should be the first sales VP for your company? Now, there are always exceptions, but 99 times out of 100, you know who it should be? You. I don't care whether you've never sold a thing before. I don't care whether you're the geekiest engineer to roam the planet. It doesn't matter. You will be the most effective sales VP, salesperson for your company for the life of your company. And do you know why that is? It's because you have more passion, you have more understanding of your product and your service than anybody else does. And that's very difficult to replicate. So at the beginning, because it's so hard to find somebody who's going to want to take on the challenge of your company when it's small to help you scale revenue, I'll come back to this in a second, you're going to be the most effective sales VP there is. So what are the steps here? Well, let me give you the basic formula for success here. Now, I'm going to talk about what to do if you've hired the wrong person in a second. But let's assume that you're starting out and you want to avoid this mistake. So how do you avoid it? Well, first you sell. And you start seeing a repeatable process. Then, do you hire your sales VP next? No. The next thing you do is you hire a sales rep or two. And you teach them the same thing. And if they're able to start selling, they're probably not going to be as effective as you, but if they're effective and you're seeing repeatable success, and this is the and statement in this, and the company is somewhere probably between $1 million ARR and $10 million ARR, then you go hire your sales VP. And what are you looking for your sales VP to do? Not to recreate the process and redo it. You're looking at your sales VP to scale your business, to take this process that you already have and scale it from 2 reps to 10 reps to 20 reps to 100 reps. That's what you're looking at, is somebody who understands how to do that. Maybe they're going to make some tweaks. That's cool. But they don't need to recreate it and do it from scratch because you've already done it. That's what you want. That's what you're looking for. So now let's say you have the wrong person and you sense you have the wrong person. Well, how do you know? Well, if they're not selling, that's one way that you know you've got the wrong person. So if they're not selling and they're not able to scale, and they're not taking the leads that you're giving them and executing on those leads properly, well, that's the clearest indicator of all. Now there's a timing thing in here. And here's how I think about the timing thing. Think about how long it takes from identifying a customer to winning the customer. Let's say in this example that I'm coming up with, that takes 3 months. Well, if you're going 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months, and the sales VP isn't getting it, things aren't getting better, they're not scaling, and your sales VP is floundering, that's the time to move on from your sales VP. It is really hard to get this right. It is really challenging to get this right, but you can do it. But it's tough to do it. But that's my key to success with sales VP. Sales VPs is what I described here. Okay, let's go on to number 11 and number 12, my killer of all killer mistakes. And this one harkens back to co-founders, which we talked about in episode 1. You don't have a vesting schedule for your stock. And this can be a real killer for you. Now, there are ways out of this that I'll explain. And you definitely, for all of this, you need a lawyer. Let me tell you that too. And I'll give you what I call my jailhouse law on this as well. But here's the thing. You want a vesting schedule for all of your stock. You know, and let's say you and your co-founders have agreed, it's you and your co-founder are going to divide it up 50-50 between the two of you. That's cool, that's fine. But have a 4-year minimum vesting schedule for your stock. Have that first year have a 1-year cliff. Now, why a 1-year cliff? What does this mean? In other words, for the first year, no stock vests. And then what happens at the end of the first year? Well, 1/4 of your stock vests. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because it prevents you from making a killer mistake. Let's say you have the wrong co-founder. And as I said, 50%, from my experience, over 50% of co-founder relationships end in failure. So if you've brought on the wrong co-founder and it's before 1 year of operation, you can cut ties with your co-founder and you haven't killed yourself from an equity standpoint. That's what you want to avoid. So now let's say you've gotten into this situation and you don't have a vesting schedule for your stock and you have a problem with your co-founder. Well, what can you do? Well, you can negotiate. And every time I've seen somebody in this position before, they're usually able to negotiate something that works. So you can use this 4-year vesting schedule as a way to think about what should my co-founder get. Now, if it's within a year, you're likely going to have to give your co-founder something. It's somewhere between 0 and 1/4 of all of their stock. But you can negotiate in there. It's not the whole thing. There are ways around this. As I said, so you can negotiate. If it's after a year, then you can use the rest of that vesting schedule to figure out what they should get. Use your lawyer to help you. Now let's say you have somebody out there that just isn't cooperating, doesn't want to give in, says, I want my 1/2 of the company, whatever it is. What do? Well, there's still options for you. Still try and negotiate. And then you can very calmly tell this particular person, again, work with a lawyer, but here are your options. You can go bring on other investors and dilute this person. You can increase the number of shares and dilute them that way. All of this is legal stuff to do. There are all sorts of ways that you can dilute them. Or if they still won't cooperate, still won't agree, I've had one person I've worked with do exactly this. Shut the company down because this person wasn't cooperative, started a new company. You can always do that. You have options. Just remember that, and remember you have the leverage, not the person that left. Remember that too. Okay, let's move on to number 12 on the list. This is the one you absolutely, positively, 100% want to avoid because it can cause havoc. It can kill your company. It is really difficult to pull yourself out of this one if this happens to you. And I know this from personal experience because I had this happen to me. And that's if you choose the wrong investors. Choosing the wrong investors, what I call investor company mismatch, is an absolute killer. Now, why is this a killer? Well, because you know who loses if your investors want one thing and you want another thing, regardless of how well the business is doing, you lose. Almost every single time, the one with the money is going to win. And that's true here too. So the first thing is, how do you choose the right investors? Let's flip this around. How do you choose that right investor? Well, observe their behavior when they're courting you. If you're dating somebody, are you on your best behavior or are you on your worst behavior? Well, it's obvious. You're on your best. So if you're seeing signs already of your investor doing things or your potential investor doing things that you don't like and are concerning to you, well, maybe it's time to move on from that particular investor. Now, I'm very aware they may be the only investor you have, and in that case, you just have to make a pragmatic decision. Maybe it's better off to deal with the crappy investor than it is not to have any money. But if you have choices, regardless of the deal terms, move on from an investor that is already exhibiting signs that they're the wrong investor. So a sign might be a tranche in a deal. I had a tranche with our first investor. Now, we didn't have a choice. We were down. We had 63 investors pass on us. This was the 64th one. If it was them or nobody, pretty much at that point in time. So we had to deal with all their craziness. So if you have a tranche, which means that the money is going to come in 2 steps, that's a problem because there's no guarantee you're going to get the second tranche of cash. None. I don't care what the terms are. There's always a way for an investor to back out. Doesn't matter. So it could be a tranche. It could be that they're throwing in interesting terms. It could be that suddenly an investor doesn't want to have a board seat. Now, why is that a problem? Well, because then they have no fiduciary responsibility to the company if they don't have a board seat. It's clever. There's one particular investor out there in Silicon Valley that espouses this, not being on boards. I'm not going to say who he is, but if you do some digging, you can figure it out. And I know exactly why he does this. It's because he knows he has no fiduciary responsibility at all to that company. He can do whatever he wants. That's not what you want in an investor. You want investors that are all in. So yeah, you want them on your board, especially if they've taken a sizable chunk of your company. You want them on your board. So now what do you do if you have an investor that's bad or evil? Well, it depends on the circumstances. One thing you can do is just execute. If you execute well and you do well, it's harder for an investor to back out. It's harder for an investor to have power over you if you just execute on your plan. But even that may not save you. So if you have a bad investor, well, you want to have other investors around the table that can take up the slack for the bad investor. I've seen this happen. I've lived this as well. That was our way out of this challenge with our bad investor, was finding other investors, diluting this particular investor so he just didn't matter anymore. That's your other way out of this, is just making that particular investor's power over you less. But the key is avoid this, because even with what I'm describing, I'm going to be really honest with you, it does not mean that you're going to survive. If an investor wants to do you in, the odds are they will do you in, because they can do all sorts of nefarious things to you to kill you and kill your business. I know this is not a fun one to end on, but it's just reality. So avoid this at all costs. This is the one killer mistake that you want to avoid and you do not want to have happen to you. I've lived this one. It is painful to go through, and I don't want anybody to go through what I went through. So try and avoid this. Do your homework up front. Oh, I got a couple other tips for you on this one as well. Some more tips. Talk to people that have taken money from this particular investor. That's a really smart thing to do. And if you can, find CEOs of companies that have failed and worked with the investors that you're talking to. Now, why is that important? Because you want to understand the behavior of the investor all the way through the process. Were they supportive or did they bail? Because maybe they were really supportive, yet the company still failed. So ask those questions, because those are all really important questions to help you out. Well, I hope this helps. Those are, now we've gone through my list of 12 killer mistakes you absolutely positively want to avoid as a startup CEO. I'm Brett at brettjfox.com. I've enjoyed speaking with you today. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks.